Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The oldest Egyptian funerary boat. Just about a decade ago, Egyptologist Jan Tristant was going over an excavation report written in 1914. The report was in relation to a tomb at an elite cemetery in Egypt's Abu Rawash that was excavated by French archaeologist Pierre Montet. Jan found it strange that Pierre mentioned a mud brick tomb with a wooden floor slightly to the north. Jan decided to take his own team and investigate the spot mentioned by Pierre a century prior. It wound up being one of the biggest discoveries in Egyptian history. Jan Tristant and his team uncovered the oldest funerary boat ever found in Egypt, a massive vessel dating back to 2950 BC. The Egyptians were using funerary boats 4,000 years before the Vikings picked up the tradition. The boat found near Abu Rawash was used in the burial of someone who had to be a high-ranking official. The archaeologists found ceramic beer jars and molds for bread. There may have been a massive funerary feast prior to the boat being buried. But what was the point of burying somebody in a boat? It's because ancient Egyptians believed that if a person was buried in a boat, that boat would carry them into the afterlife. It was like a post-death taxi service to heaven. The tradition was typically reserved for pharaohs or privileged members of society who could afford to have a boat built and buried. Very few boats have been found outside royal tombs. Number 9. The treasure of Bosco Reale. In 1876, Vincenzo de Brisco discovered the ruins of a very old farm on his family property in Bosco Reale, an Italian town near the border of Pompeii. The excavations didn't immediately yield anything. It wasn't until almost 20 years later that workers discovered a hidden treasure of gold, silver, and jewelry. It turned out the farm was an ancient building used in the cultivation of wine and perhaps olive oil. In the storage tank of the wine cellar, workers found 109 gold and silver plates. They also found an amazing stash of jewelry, plus roughly 1,000 gold Roman coins known as aureus. The stash was worth a fortune, but the coolest part is that the most recent of the gold coins dated to the year 78 AD. Those with a good memory will recall that Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. It's very likely that when the mountain blew its top and Pompeii was destroyed, the treasure was buried in the wine cellar in some vain attempt to safeguard the family's wealth. What many people don't know about Mount Vesuvius is that the eruption that destroyed Pompeii lasted for 9 days. It wasn't just one big explosion. It went on and on. The family who owned the farm likely stashed their riches and fled thinking the gods were destroying the world. They may have been too scared to ever return to the family home. Following the discovery, Vincenzo de Brisco traveled to Paris and tried to sell the treasure to the Louvre Museum. The museum refused, and the treasure wound up being bought by Baron Rothschild. But then Rothschild donated the treasure to the museum for free. It remains on display at the Louvre to this very day. What would you do if you found gold coins on your property? Would you try to sell it or keep it a secret? Let me know in the comments below. And now for number 8. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Nolasco and all my team of Arfs for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about strange archaeological discoveries. Number 8. The Lost Village of Tullor. Tullor village in Chile's Atacama Desert was settled 2,500 years ago. It's a truly remarkable site, complete with the ruins of circular adobe structures in which ancient people once lived. But something happened in the year 300 AD that caused everyone to pick up and leave. After roughly 800 years of successfully living here in their quiet oasis village, the water dried up. The oasis was suddenly gone, and the sand dunes began pushing against their homes. It's believed the intense heat and unstoppable drought led to the total abandonment of Tullor village. What's really interesting about this site today is that it doesn't really look like the ruins of a village. When you see photographs of the remains, it looks more like a geological formation than a forgotten settlement. The village is nothing but a bunch of circular depressions in the desert. But these circular depressions were once houses, all of them squished together and surrounded by a tall perimeter wall. Even the experts will most likely never know the finer details of those who made their home in the desert. The ruins are in terrible condition and were even vandalized in 2010. Number 7. The Lost City of Talianki. In the 1970s, a Ukrainian pilot had a bit of spare time on his hands. He was experimenting with infrared aerial photography when he accidentally discovered a lost city. Near the village of Talianki, the pilot identified a mysterious settlement nobody had ever noticed before. Excavations started in 1981 at the direction of Vladimir Krutz. The excavations continued all the way into the early 2000s. Many buildings were excavated, and now archaeologists know a lot about the city, but there is still more to learn. The city, named Talianki after the modern city it's near, was home to the Cucuteni Trypillian culture starting around 3850 BC. Even though most people have never heard the name before, it was the biggest settlement in Neolithic Europe. This could be the most important lost city anywhere on the European continent. It was positively enormous, spanning 450 hectares or 1,100 acres. Archaeologists estimated there were over 2,700 buildings and 15,000 inhabitants. Seeing as the city was built 5,800 years ago, that number is mind-boggling. It's so incredible that it doesn't even seem possible. Just 1,400 years ago, the city of Teotihuacan in Mexico, considered one of the largest in the Americas, had only 25,000 inhabitants. The European city of Talianki in Ukraine was a prehistoric metropolis beyond your imagination. Some have even estimated there may have been 30,000 people living in the main city and the surrounding area. Unfortunately, nobody knows what happened. It's unclear if the city was destroyed through war or if there was a natural disaster. Almost nothing is left of it today, and many don't even know it exists. Number 6. The Bedlam Burial Ground. In London, England, a project was underway to expand the railway network. This was a big operation costing somewhere around $22 billion. But London is a very old city, and any construction project this big tends to reveal some secrets of the past. And that's exactly what happened. Workers stumbled upon a burial ground filled with skeletons. The burial ground isn't too ancient, only dating back 4 centuries. It's called the Bedlam Burial Ground and was in use between 1569 and 1738. Experts believe there could be over 20,000 bodies buried in the graveyard, hidden beneath the modern streets of London. During the recent construction, they only excavated about 3,000 skeletons. That's still a lot. There could still be 17,000 more buried in the earth. But why were so many people buried here over the course of 200 years in the late Middle Ages? The Bedlam Burial Ground was not the most prestigious cemetery in London. It was where poor people went to be stuffed in the ground rather unceremoniously. People buried here include victims of the English Civil War and the Great Plague of 1665. People who died in the Great Fire of London were likely buried here as well. Those who could not afford to be buried at their church were often buried in the Bedlam Burial Ground, as well as the bodies that couldn't fit in other cemeteries and needed somewhere to be dumped. Number 5. AI and the Nazca Lines. Scientists have used artificial intelligence to make some amazing discoveries in Peru's Nazca region. They found 3 previously unidentified Nazca Lines that were etched in the desert sand 2,400 years ago. It's amazing anybody missed them because one of the newfound figures is 250 feet across. It's a pair of legs. Yes, legs. Just some giant random legs stretching across the desert. The researchers also identified a 62-foot wide fish and a 56-foot wide bird. The total number of geoglyphs in the Peruvian desert is now at over 350. The first were discovered by pilots in the 1920s. In the subsequent years of research, monkeys and whales were identified. There were strange geometric tools and hummingbirds. Now, scientists are using AI. In 2019, it was announced that a new humanoid figure was found, also using artificial intelligence. And now scientists have a massive pair of legs to brag about. How is this all possible with AI? It's about deep learning systems that process information much like the human brain. The system is trained by teaching it what the other geoglyphs look like and then feeding it images of the desert. The AI can then easily make out the pictures that human eyes would miss. Archaeologists say the AI is working at about 21 times faster than trained professionals. It's just too bad the artificial intelligence can't explain the forgotten purpose behind the Nazca Lines. Number 4. The Scottish Brochs. The history of Scotland is more than just crumbling castles perched at the edge of the sea. Scotland is covered in bizarre 2,000-year-old skyscrapers made of stone. These skyscrapers are known as brochs. Much of their history remains a mystery to researchers. They weren't made anywhere else in the British Isles, only Scotland. The ancient builders constructed them out of dry stone, piling the bricks several stories tall. They built hundreds of them, starting around 2,600 years ago. They continued building them for a span of 700 years until the 1st century AD. The biggest problem is that archaeologists don't know what they were used for. The massive towers had no windows. Some of them were the tallest things for miles around. The majority of them are also located in the northern reaches of the Scottish Highlands. They are on remote islands like Orkney or the Shetland Islands. It was mainly the people of the far north who built the stone towers. Experts think they might have been used as places of refuge. When the Roman slave ships came, those who lived near the coast hid in windowless towers, hoping to be spared. Another school of thought is that rich landowners had them commissioned to show off their wealth and status. In total, an estimated 500 brochs have been identified throughout Scotland, but there is only one that remains largely intact. It's on the small island of Mousa, a remote piece of land that nobody even lives on. It's totally uninhabited, making you wonder who would have possibly lived on it 2,000 years ago. The Mousa broch is the tallest one that still stands at 44 feet high. What do you think ancient people used brochs for? Let me know in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 3. The mysterious Holy Island in Wales. There is a tiny island off the coast of Anglesey in Wales by the name of Holy Island. That's not to be confused with the Holy Island in England. This one is about 15 square miles and covered with proof of life 6,000 years ago. Starting in 2006, the Gwynedd Archaeological Trust began excavating the island ahead of a big government development site. A huge plot of land was picked apart by archaeologists, who were shocked at just how much stuff they found. Senior archaeologist Jane Kenny said the team found a timber house built by Neolithic humans 5,700 years ago. Researchers were able to document the changes that occurred on the island over the past 6 millennia. Because the island is so small and relatively undeveloped, history has yet to be erased. Soon, archaeologists had unveiled an entire stone settlement from 2,400 years ago. Stone roundhouses and other buildings, many of which are aligned with the sunrise in spring. The experts excavated pieces of jewelry and housewares from the Bronze Age. There was a very large community living here continuously for thousands of years, but archaeologists don't know who they were or what they believed in. Nobody even knows why they eventually abandoned the island. Number 2. The Step Pyramid of Dozer. It's hard to say that the Step Pyramid of Dozer was ever discovered. The gigantic pyramid at Saqqara has been standing for 4,700 years and has never really been lost. How do you lose a monument so huge and impressive? It's impossible unless maybe the jungle grows over it, but that's not about to happen in the Egyptian desert. The pyramid was the first ever built. It was commissioned by Pharaoh Dozer in the 3rd dynasty. Although it was the pharaoh who commissioned the structure, he obviously didn't design and build it. That was left to his vizier, Imhotep. Imhotep was such a genius that the Egyptians turned him into a deity for building their first pyramid. The structure began as a mastaba tomb. This was a kind of roofed structure used to bury earlier pharaohs. The issue was that pharaohs kept having their bodies pillaged by grave robbers. The pyramid was an attempt to make grave robbing impossible on a royal burial. Egyptologist Reg Clark believes the only reason to upgrade from tombs to pyramids was to protect the royal corpse and the treasure in the burial chamber. The only secondary reason may have been because the pyramid left behind an immortal legacy. Sadly for the great King Dozer, the pyramid failed. It was broken into and pillaged. The mummy of Dozer was taken away long before archaeologists ever got to it. But Dozer wasn't the only one ever buried in the pyramid. Recent archaeological work revealed 3 mummies in the pharaoh's burial chamber years after he was already dead. They found burials from 712 to 332 BC. That was 2,000 years after Dozer's death. Number 1. The Headless Vikings. One of the most shocking archaeological discoveries in the history of England was made in June 2009. In the seaside town of Weymouth, while excavating ahead of a new road, workers found some skulls. Then they found some skeletons. And before anyone knew what was happening, a mass grave was revealed with 54 dismembered skeletons. The mass grave was part of an abandoned Roman quarry. 54 people were dumped into the quarry and buried, along with 51 skulls. Oh yeah, and the skulls were not connected to the bodies. It was a huge deal when the discovery was made, but it's been over 10 years and researchers have put most of the pieces together. Analysis of the bones has proved the dead people were Vikings from Scandinavia. They lived at some point between the 5th and 10th centuries in the Middle Ages. All the remains belonged to males in their prime fighting years, but none of the skeletons had evidence of battle wounds. This led archaeologists to suspect the men were captured, then executed. Because no scraps of fiber were found in the pit, it's likely the men were naked when they were decapitated. The one remaining question, and it's a good one, is what happened to the other 3 skulls? Scientists think they may have been taken as souvenirs. They may have also been mounted on stakes as a warning to the other Vikings. But because they've never been found, nobody can say for sure. What do you think happened to the 3 missing Viking skulls? Let me know your theories in the comments. Thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe if you haven't already and come back soon for more awesome videos. See you later! Bye!